Hi, my name is Peter. This is the Peter on Health channel. This video is called My Take on the Trump shooting. Happened a little over a week ago. And, so why am I talking about that on the Peter on Health channel? It's about the health of our nation. So usually I just talk about our bodily health, on this channel, but, body politic, I guess. And, I've been telling friends that if that attempt on Trump's life was successful, I think that might have been the definitive end of America as we know it. Land of the home, free of the brave. The first country that had a Bill of Rights for individual citizens that protected it from excesses of the government. And, but anyway, what's interesting to me about that event is it really illustrates a point I realized during the 2 to 3 years of COVID land, because it wasn't until that period of lockdowns and then we all had a lot of time to ponder and think. And the biggest problem I had was I didn't take any of the jabs but and I live near Silicon Valley in California. And every single one of my friends I've known for decades, went to school with in the 80s or worked with, 20 years ago. Every one of them was jabbed multiple times, at a minimum three, and I still have two of my closest friends, one I've known for over 3 decades, um, who introduced me to my wife, another fellow who, published a book and I wrote the foreword to it. So these are very close friends. And they've taken all the jabs and the boosters and are going to take the next one too. And every other friend, stopped at 3 or 4. And, being someone who, like, from the first day of the lockdowns, just spider sense, sniffed out the malevolence of the deep state who was pushing this. I was on the opposite side of my friends. And I had to answer a question that was just puzzling me. How could my friends, who were extremely smart, I have multiple graduate degrees, my friends do, we have very detailed discussions, and I was just like, how could they be so stupid to believe all the propaganda? And then, for me and my type of personality, then, I had this welling feeling inside of me of disdain for these friends I've really admired and liked for decades. And now I don't like them at all. Like, I just see them as patsies and propaganda swillers. And 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 the way I was able to, like, come back to liking them and being accepting and all that was to realize that I myself don't know anything. Well, I know a few things. I know what I had for breakfast this morning, which I just finished an hour ago. I'll forget it by tomorrow, maybe, but um, but the things of interest to talk about, like I talk about on this channel, autophagy and other topics, of my health. I don't have actual knowledge of any of it. I mean, I can tell you what my phone is recording, but I can't tell you that's a true indicator of my body or whatever. And, my biological age, being 43, even though I know I'm 61, according to my birth certificates or what my parents told me. But am I biologically 43? Well, I'd have to believe a paper written in 2018. So anyway, back to the shooting. When I realized I don't know anything, like 98%, 99% what I talk about is just belief. I believe it through whatever, method my brain works, right? And during COVID land, my beliefs on it like conflicted with my friends. And I realized they don't know anything either. They just believe stuff and I believe other stuff. So then we come back to the shooting, right? And I'll say, what do I know about the shooting? I'll say nothing. Zero. What do you know about the shooting? Nothing. Zero. Meaning that unless you were at the event in Pennsylvania, you're at the rally, and you can testify to what you heard, what you saw. That's only like 1,000 people. I don't know what number were there, but those people have actual knowledge of the thing. The rest of us have just seen videos, heard and seen videos on the internet. And boy, has there been a lot of videos. And because I relate this shooting to the JFK shooting, contrast it with that, and the George Floyd case. Let's go to the George Floyd case. That's the case where the cop was kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes, and George Floyd died like, I don't know, at minute 5 or 6, and the cop wasn't even paying attention. And finally, after 8 minutes, he's like, well, let's check what this guy's doing. And he was dead. Now, pro-cop people will say, oh, he died of a heart attack. But, you sit on a guy's neck and he can't breathe. You got a holistic view of the body. Like air comes in, goes into the lungs, and feeds the heart, and oxygenation, and whatever. And if you constrict that airflow, there's many ways you could die: brain aneurysm, a stroke, a heart, whatever. And just the fact that an actual heart attack killed George Floyd, to save the cop kneeling on your neck for 8 minutes didn't have anything to do with it. Yeah, I wasn't buying that for a minute. But here's the thing. That event happened after the age of smartphones. Ugh, it's in my pocket here, right? I'm old, and I remember a world before these things came along. And when was that world? Before 2008. That's when the first iPhone came out. 2008, I was 45. Yeah, 45. So I lived my first 45 years of my life with no smartphones. And only the last decade of that 45 years, 35, was when any cell phones came out. The flip phones, the little, cube phones we had. And you couldn't really do anything with them other than make calls, receive calls, text, and have grainy photos. And the smartphone, when it came out in 2008, just revolutionized phones. Suddenly, everybody in the world became a journalist. Everybody became a photographer. And that's where the George Floyd thing happened. Everybody whipped out their cell phones, and we got all kinds of different cell phones of the cop kneeling on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes. And on the shooting that happened a week ago at the Trump rally, we got so many videos. Now, we have to believe that there are actually videos from the rally, but that seems like a short hop to believe that the rally actually did happen and that there actually were shots fired, and that there was a guy named, just take the guy, like the shooter, right? Thomas Matthew Crooks, I guess they say, 20 years old, from Bethel, Pennsylvania. Like the night of the shooting, there were trolls on the internet. Then the first name for the shooter that was cropping up was an anglicized version of an Italian soccer player named Marco Violet or something like that. And that quickly became, known as just some troll who was pushing that. And then the next troll thing that happened was a guy on Twitter whose Twitter handle was Jew gazing, I think, and his Twitter name was Foreskin with the number 4. And he actually looked a lot like Thomas Crooks, and he had wire rim glasses and long blonde hair. And so he started trolling that he was the actual shooter. And then he posted a video he deleted quickly that he said, "Hey, my name is Thomas Matthew Crooks. I hate the Republicans. I hate Trump, but you got the wrong guy." And that video went viral all over the internet. And anyway, the New York Post was the first to reveal, I think, that night that the shooter was Thomas Matthew Crook's name, but they had the picture of this troll Jew gazing, so it was confusing, right? Like, who was the real shooter, whatever. But now we finally have a kid, and you have your typical loner, the kind of mass shooter kid, just a nobody liked, and whatever. And so it seems pretty clear, just like Lee Harvey Oswald and Sirhan were like actually at, the JFK assassination in 63 and the RFK assassination in 68, respectively. They were there and they had guns. And, I guess if I don't move my mouse, my screensaver came on. The question was, were they just patsies, for the real shooter? And so, like, let's go to the Kennedy assassination in 63. In that time, right, the story was there's Lee Harvey Oswald in the book depository, up here, let's say, and the car is going, that way. And Lee Harvey Oswald shoots at the car that's passing the book depository. So this is from behind Kennedy. And there clearly is a shot that I think comes behind Kennedy because he lurches forward and it maybe goes through his neck and into Connolly's arm. And then there's a shot where the back of his head blows off and it doesn't go forward like he lurched forward when he was hit from behind. Lurches and goes backward onto the back of the car, and Jackie is shown, trying to grab the piece of head, like she's in shock. And so the Warren Commission, founded by the guy that Kennedy fired, I actually had a law professor when I went to Stanford who was a clerk to Justice Warren in 1963, and he was a really clever guy. And I remember talking about the Kennedy assassination with him, and he just was, still all those years later, just saying, "Oh yeah, it was true." But the reason I bring that up is, boy, in retrospect now, put it this way. In 1963, the number of people who believed that there was a lone shooter, Oswald, he was in the book depository, and, whatever, and then some guy named Jack Ruby, it was actually Jack Rubenstein, came and shot him at the police station, American hero, killing this guy who killed our president, beloved president. That story was believed by upwards of 80 to 90% of Americans. This is long before Americans lost trust in their government and their media. But there was a guy named Abraham Zapruder who was across from the grassy knoll, and he was shooting film like the old cameras. He didn't have a cell phone. They didn't have them in 63, but he had an old, motion picture camera. And he was taking a really high quality shot of Kennedy's motorcade coming right at the time of the shot. And so you could see the lurching forward. Like when I say Kennedy lurched forward and the head blew back, that's based on Zapruder film. Well, was the Zapruder film released in 1963? Nope. It was like 10 years later. Like, it was a lot. It was many, 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 many years later, long after the Kennedy assassination was being discussed in the public. But when the public saw the Zapruder film, that 80 to 90% belief in a lone shooter dropped precipitously, quickly to 50-50, because of the second shot, the shot where, because I mean, the Warren report, I haven't read it, but, I asked my professor that, how the hell could a bullet come, into the back of your head, create, a piece of your skull hits and it gets, removed. And instead of that piece of skull going in the path of the bullet, goes backward toward the path of the bullet to the back of the car. How did that happen, right? And he said, oh, well, I can't remember what he said, but it was some quote unquote scientific explanation, right? And, he was a young lawyer at the time, and he believed the explanation. And what it reminds me of now is the howling, COVID land, trust the science phrase, right? And it's like 9/11, like 210 skyscrapers because of fire collapsed perfectly on their own footprint. And we're supposed to just believe it was the high fire from the planes and whatever. And, the point is, none of us are experts. We're not architects. We're not damage control people. And there's one other thing that the shooting reminded me of. Was during COVID land, because there were in the past week there have been snipers, former snipers, who were snipers for the U.S. military, snipers for the Canadian military, just snipers, and then they did it for a decade, and part of their work was not just getting in war zones and sniping the enemy, but actually being part of a team that was protecting a VIP, like an ex-president. And every one of them described the same process, that not the day of the event, the day before, maybe 2 days before, maybe a week before, you come to the event area, you scout out 360 degrees around where, the stage where the VIP is going to be, out to like 500 yards or something, and you look for every elevated position that a shooter might take. So the roof that Crooks was on, that people saw him on, was probably the number one spot. The number one spot, if sniper came and looked and said, where would be the clearest shot be? It would be the roof where Crooks went. And then there was a water tower nearby, and that's another one, like straight shot to the thing. And none of them were guarded by Secret Service or local police. So to the snipers, they were like extremely suspicious. This is something worse than incompetence. And, so then you have to, I've never been a sniper. I've never worked, on such a detail. Although you could just kind of think of it like, okay, none of us have been in the Secret Service or detail, and like we're just plopped right into like, okay, Kamala Harris is coming to a place in Idaho and she's going to give a talk at a rally, and your job is to protect it. And you have to think about it. Well, how do I protect her? Well, you make sure there's a fence put around, and then there's metal detectors so that, and then I don't know, people can 3D print guns now, so I don't know how you would check for that, but certainly the people coming in the perimeter, you have the checks. And then you would think, well, yeah, people could like be from outside and have long range rifles, so then you would look at all the elevated spots, the trees, the this, the that. And if you were in charge of the team, you would actually say, okay, you're on that roof, you're on that roof. I mean, it doesn't take a person, working in that field for 20, 30 years to think that, right? And they didn't do that. So that is extremely, extremely suspicious. And then one of the most interesting things I've heard in terms of videos in the last week, because there's so many different takes on it, is the sound analysis, because that's all free for everybody. The microphone sounds from right where Trump was, that audio is available on Twitter, on a bunch of places. And if you were the type of person who was like, okay, I'm going to record that sound, and you could hear like the sound of the bullets, it goes pop, thud, And what that is, again, I have to believe the people I'm listening to, but the pop is the bullet, you know, passing through, faster than the speed of sound. And then the thud after it is actually the speed of sound report from the rifle. So pop, space, thud. And the distance between in time, the pop and the thud, algebra can calculate the likely distance of the shooter. And what these people have said is that there were three shooters at the event, and the last of the three was the government sniper who killed Crooks. So the first two, though, Crooks looks like he got off 5 shots from the same roof because the pop thud had exactly the same sound and distance between the pop and the thud. But there were three more shots that sounded different and were really pop thud, pop thud, pop thud. And so somebody said, well, the gun must have been closer. But then another person I've seen analyze it was like pop, pop, longer time, thud, thud. So there was two pops, and it's hard to tell, as you're listening. But the point is, they're saying that second gun was, instead of 400 feet away, which Crooks was 800 feet away. And a video I watched showed that the distance from the Trump podium to the top of the water tower was, lo and behold, 800 feet. So correlated with the sound in the middle of the shots. So there's 8 shots. The time stamps, the time signatures show 5 were from Crooks's gun, 400 feet away. The last shot was something like 1,400 feet away, which was the sniper that killed. And then the middle 5 were these other shots. So I've watched different people analyze the sound pattern, and point they're making is, whether that second gun was closer or further. There was a second gun, and it couldn't have been Crooks. Could not have been Crooks. Crooks had one gun, a rifle, and then he went pop, 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 trigger, and until he got shot. And but the other one, whether it was closer or further, depending on how you listen to the pops and the thuds, do not fit Crooks's pattern. And again, I haven't done that sound analysis myself. I'm not a gun expert. I've never even heard this pop thud thing before, Yeah, and like I say, I'll just conclude. It reminded me, like in COVID land, when there were morticians, people who, my mother died on a Monday night, and I think we had her service on a Friday. Well, that Monday night, my dad made a phone call, and some people came and picked up my mother. I didn't know who. And Friday, we buried her, and we had a church service and then buried her. And I remember Friday we saw her, and it was like she's alive. She's sleeping now. She was a little pale, but she was dead. Well, I didn't even know what happened between that Monday night and that Friday at the church service. Well, I learned during COVID land, at least I think I learned, because I was hearing morticians who were reporting that in 2021, and there was only a handful of them, one or less than, like, you can count on one hand, who would actually give interviews and say, it wasn't until 2021 that we experienced the following. They say, okay, a dead body comes in, and what they do, they cut a hole somewhere in the jugular vein or artery down here, and they drain all the blood out of the dead person. And then what they do is pump into the empty blood vessels now, they pump in formaldehyde. And the whole idea is to preserve your body long enough to have a church service. And what they said during 2021, this is the first time they'd ever seen it, they punched the hole expecting blood to come out, but nothing came out. So they put a caliper in, and they pulled out like 2 feet long strings of calamari, stuff that was white and stringy. and it was 2 feet long. It wasn't like little red blood clumps that sometimes they'd see, which are normal with dead people, that blood clumps up a bit. That would be red and clumpy. This was white and stringy and 2 feet long. A foot long, 2 feet long, however long, right? And so were they lying? Were they telling the truth? Is that how they actually work? Is that how morticians actually work? I don't know. But I will say, and I'll end the video with this just to say, more information is coming out, more news. Kimberly Cheadle, what a name, eh? Cheat, for the head of the Secret Service is in front of Congress today getting excoriated. And we're going to have even more information come up. Because all these congressmen too have the same videos and same sound and same all this stuff. So I'm just saying this is not like the Kennedy assassination where nobody had any information, just had, Oswald. Oh no, we got like many civilian journalists with their cell phone cameras that showed a bunch of things that say that, oh man, these local police and the Secret Service were either intellectually 5 years old, or some of them were, maybe in on this, right? And that's what is suggested by these citizen videos. So, yeah, I just saying this is an evolving story, but I'll tell you my overall, because again, this is, I wasn't there, so I don't even know if it happened. I'm pretty sure it happened. I mean, that's like a pretty, you know what I mean? It'd be pretty remarkable if it was all staged. Um, but it looked like it did happen, especially because citizen journalists and end up on Twitter, their cell phone stuff. But I say, when someone's making an argument, like for a second shooter, or like for the Secret Service failures that seem a little more than failure, seem a little bit, whatever. And maybe Crooks was an MK Ultra subject that was mind controlled into doing what he did. Like, these are all speculations, conspiracy theories. But I say, okay, where's the money interest? Where's the money and power interest? And are these arguments or these presentations for the money interest or against the money interest? And if they're against the money interest, if they're for the money interest, I tend to think they're false, right? So whatever the FBI is saying, oh, we can't get into his phone, even though they're like, in everybody's phone, but they can't get into the shooter's phone. Yeah, right. And Kimberly Cheadle saying, "Oh, the roof was too dangerous to put the roof that Crooks was lying on, which was a 5% slope, was too dangerous for Secret Service people to get on." I mean, yeah. So, but I'm saying all this analysis of the gun reports and the pop bangs and all the snipers talking, I'm saying all of those people who are making these arguments, are they for the money or anti the money? And they're all anti the money. So I tend to think that they're onto something, if not the actual truth. I think I listen to them a little more just because they're risking themselves by going against the money. They're risking a knock on the door. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying this is a fascinating event that, had it succeeded, yeah, who knows what happens. But because it didn't, I think because of the assassination attempt, Trump picked J.D. Vance. Now, a lot of people are saying he's a deep state plant. Peter Thiel is his benefactor and all that. But yeah, everybody's with the deep state anyway in the Senate and Congress. But if you vote, if you actually vote against it, like Thomas Massey has done, J.D. Vance has done that too in the Senate. He's voted against what the deep state wants a number of times, so much so that a bunch of the big donors to Trump, they did not want J.D. Vance, whatever. Like they were very angry that Trump picked J.D. Vance. And I think Trump ended up picking him because, his Trump Trump was this close, I mean, that close to dead. There's Trump, there's video showing that like a millisecond before the shot, Trump's head is like this, and then the bullet's going to like come, oops, right there. And then he turns his head, and so the bullet goes by his ear instead. And some people are saying it was God. God, made him turn his head. I mean, if you believe in God, then hell yeah, and God favors Trump, then that would be the case. Or maybe just life is random like that, and he just literally went from being dead with a bullet in the middle of his head to like looking at a chart over here, and the bullet grazed in his ear, and then another one past the other ear. I mean, holy crap, what luck. And but I think he picked J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance, and I know a lot of leftists don't like J.D. Vance, and I hardly heard of him, but he's the Senate's version of Thomas Massey, who is my personal favorite congressman, who is, just speaking against the quote unquote deep state. What I mean by deep state, it's the permanent employees of the federal government. They live in Washington, D.C., they have a house, and no matter which party comes in every 4 years, they still got their job, whether they're in the CDC or the NIH or the DOD or the Justice Department or whatever. They're the people with permanent jobs. And over time, not all of them, but a bunch of them. Because it used to be like 20 years ago, you get somebody out of the FDA saying, hey, they're covering up Vioxx, heart attacks, they're covering up stuff. You don't hear those people anymore. It's like the dog that didn't bark. They've chased out every honest scientist out of the FDA and CDC, so that all you have now are quote unquote deep state tools of big pharma. That's what it seems like anyway. How come we don't have any whistleblowers coming out of the FDA? Well, I'll tell you why. The whistleblowers are chased down and they have to move to Russia. We're living in desperate, desperate times, and America is like hanging by a fingernail. And I'd say the three characters in America that America depends on, whether it survives my lifetime, are Trump, Elon Musk, and Tucker Carlson. Trump as the political leader, Elon as the owner of the media tool through which truth can come out, and Tucker as the media, who will interview and give long form interviews to anybody, Putin or Tara Reid or anybody. And if any of those three suddenly are reported to have a heart attack, I'll be deeply suspicious, and I'll, I'll light a candle for our America becoming extinguished. Anyway, that's I'll get back to personal health next week.